I can't do that when I'm sober. That and other things you shouldn't say to the police when they pull you over. Welcome to another episode of Suits and Boots, and we're going to talk about it today. Well, good morning, guys. So, hey, Daryl, it's good to see you again, buddy.
Good morning, Luke. It's always nice to see you, especially before we go to the office.
Ain't that the truth? So, I'm Luke Martin. This is Daryl Davidson. We're two of the partners at Benbow, Davidson, and Martin, and this is another episode of Suits and Boots Legal Talk. Today, we're going to be talking all about DWIs in North Carolina. So,
exactly.
Daryl, you do a lot of this kind of stuff.
Yes, I do.
And it's how long have you been doing criminal law?
Ooh, I've been doing criminal law actually since my feet touched the pavement, after I passed the bar. For 25 years now. Well, it's been about 25 years.
It's kind of a rite of passage. We were talking just before we started filming. Yes. Whenever I first started, and that's where we first met.
Right,
was in court.
In court.
First thing in the
deal
morning.
room. First thing in the morning.
Yeah, and I was on the court-appointed list for a long time. I think you did your stint.
I did my
on
stint.
There. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But it's been years since I've done any criminal work, so I'm going to have to lean on you for this podcast because I don't know what I'm talking about.
No problem. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. Remember that.
So. Well, if we have a DWI, so if that's what we're going to talk about today, if someone gets stopped for a DWI, what happens? What's the deal?
Well, normally what people, talk about, they'll say a DUI or DWI. It's still the same thing. It's driving while impaired. It's governed by the North Carolina General Statute 20-138.1, I do believe. And normally when I talk to people, when they come into the office, the first thing I talk to them about is the officer has to stop. Any law enforcement officer, if they stop you, there has to be a reason to stop you.
Yeah.
They can't just automatically stop you and say, hey, I think you've been driving under the influence or subject to an impaired substance. They actually have to have what they call reasonable suspicion that you're violating some traffic law or you're violating some law. And once they stop you, if they have a reason or a valid reason to stop you, they can't automatically say, okay, I'm stopping you for speeding, but I'm going to charge you with a driving while impaired. They have to develop probable cause. So for example, if they stop you for speeding and the officer approaches the car and they talk with you a little bit and they say, hey, I smell a little bit of alcohol. Have you been drinking? And that normally starts it out.
Yeah.
And so they don't just develop what probable cause is just automatically from one question. I like to explain to my clients that it's a totality of the circumstances. It's basically putting these facts on a scale that will measure up to what they call probable cause. Like, for example, have you been drinking? Yes, I have. If you have an open container in the car, that's another thing that they put on the scale to get probable cause. If they smell the odor of alcohol, which normally they do, that's another thing they put on the scale. And by that time, a lot of times they've asked you, okay, can you step out of the car? I'd like you to perform some field sobriety tests for me. And based on the field sobriety test, and a lot of people don't have this understanding, it's not really a pass or fail. They're really looking for clues of impairment.
Yeah.
Okay. And so once you're out of the car and you go through the field sobriety test, they're still trying to develop probable cause. They can also use things such as, were you leaving a bar? What time of night was it? Was your driving so bad that it looked like you might have been under the influence of anything while you were operating that vehicle? So after they develop probable cause, if they're able to develop probable cause while you're out there on the scene, because they'll ask you a series of questions. They'll do tests like the one-legged stand test. They'll do what they call the HGN test, where they take the pen. People say, well, they put the pen in front of my eyes. They'll do that test. Yeah. They'll also do the walk and turn. And based on the clues that the officer may see or may not see, as well as, the information that you've given them or you've provided them, then that's what a lot of times develops the probable cause. I always tell individuals that, you normally, as the defendant, sometimes you provide the best information or the best evidence for the officer to actually, charge you with the DUI or driving while impaired, should I say. And people get a little confused because you do, or some officers will have you more likely than not blow on the scene. There's what this apparatus called an Alka sensor, which is not valid in court, under certain circumstances, but if it registers anything that you have alcohol in your system, of course, that's another weight on the scale of probable cause. So I normally tell individuals that it's not just blowing a .08. The statute says that you either have a blood alcohol level of a .08 or you were appreciably impaired from some, impairing substance. So it's not just the .08. Somebody could actually get out of the car after they've been stopped for speeding and they can't stand on their feet. They may not register anything as far as alcohol is concerned, but the officer may have a pretty good idea that you're under some impairing substance that, you should not have been operating this motor vehicle. So it's not just they stop you for the heck of it and hey, I think you might be under the influence. They have to develop probable cause. So normally, I tell my clients, I look for two things at the very beginning, which is one, did they have a reason to stop you? And number two, did they have a probable cause, to arrest you? So after they develop the probable cause and they arrest you, then it's a whole different set of things after that point.
Yeah. So then you go to the is it an intoxilizer that's at the at the police station or the sheriff's office?
Yes.
And that's where you actually blow that is admissible.
Exactly.
Right?
And so what they do is the officer takes you into custody or another officer takes you into custody. Sometimes it's not the officer that stopped you or the state highway patrolman that stopped you. It's just another officer that stops you. They'll take you to the nearest station. If you're in Mooresville, they go to the Mooresville Police Department. Here in Statesville, they'll take you to the Alva County Jail. And they basically have you blow on what they call the intoxilizer. Now, that is the actual evidence that they will use to bring into court to show your BAC level. The thing about the intoxilizer, though, they before you actually blow into it, they read you your rights regarding whether you should or should not blow is depending on your circumstances. I normally tell individuals that, those circumstances we can discuss when you come, into the office and speak with me. Yeah. But there are individuals who decide that they're going to refuse. And of course, there are certain consequences that come along with you refuse. And one of the biggest consequences that comes along with it is they can get a search warrant and take blood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, that's one of the things that's, over the years that, when I first started practicing, I don't believe that was the case, but it's been going on for so long, it seems like it's always been routine.
Yeah.
They can actually get a search warrant to draw your blood, regardless of whether or not.
Is that pretty much will they almost always get that search warrant, or is that something that's
pretty much?
Hit or miss?
Pretty much. I've had a couple of cases where they've gotten a search warrant, but they didn't have anybody to actually draw the blood, or they've went to either Memorial Hospital, or they've went to the Davis Hospital at the time to actually get the blood drawn. And it used to be that it would take such a long time to actually get that back, but at the end of the day, even if you refuse, okay, there are ways that they will be able to actually secure, some evidence to. And if you refuse,
you're probably going to automatically lose your license.
You automatically lose your license for a year.
So if you refuse,
if you refuse, exactly, you automatically lose your license for a year. So individuals ask me, well, should I blow or should I not blow? It really depends on what your circumstances are at the time. There are some individuals who've had driving while impaired convictions within the last 7 years that triggers certain punishment. And we could talk about that also.
There's got to be, when you go in, let's say they blow and it is over a .08, I mean, how long are you in jail? Are they going to keep you there for days, or what's the?
No, they don't let you keep you there. They don't keep you there for days. Normally, what happens is they'll allow you some time for someone to come and pick you up
that day.
That day.
So it's not like you're spending time.
Exactly. They're not going to make you. If you get arrested for a driving while impaired, there's nothing that says that you have to be in custody for 24 or 48 hours or anything of that sort. Yeah. As long as you have somebody that can come and actually sign you out. Somebody, of course, with a valid driver's license. You don't want any of your friends coming to pick you up from the jail.
That were at the bar with you.
That were at the bar with you, or had a driving while license revoked, or doesn't have not licensed to drive. That wouldn't really be good.
Maybe just get an Uber.
Yeah, get an Uber.
Just get an Uber.
And and for some individuals, it's devastating. It's devastating because they think about all the consequences of it, and sometimes the consequences are not as bad. I'm not going to say it's not going to sting a little bit, but sometimes the consequences are not as bad. But it depends on the individual. So after you are processed through the part where they take either the blood or you actually blow, they'll write you the citation if it's a .08 or more. And actually, I've seen them charge individuals where it was .07.
Yeah. I was actually thinking, so you were talking about appreciable impairment.
Yes.
I was in court one day watching a trial, and this guy was charged with boating while impaired. So he was running his boat. So they checked. He blew a .07.
Right.
And I thought, boy, the defense attorney's got this in the
Yes.
bag. There's no way he's losing this one. Well, the judge found the guy guilty.
Yes.
Appreciable impairment. It doesn't matter that he didn't blow a .08.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you'll find that different districts, I don't say they do different things, but I know in some districts across the state, .08 or .06, there are times where the DA's office will take a look at it and say, depending on that circumstance and what was going on, we may not, want to move forward with it. But normally here, if it's a .07 or .08, they'll find a way, and sometimes they'll bring in an expert to testify what your BAC or your blood alcohol level was at the time that you were operating the motor vehicle.
So it's probably just the best policy. If you're going to drink, just have a designated driver.
Just have a
Get
designated
Uber,
driver.
Call a taxi.
Do something.
Any of those. Just don't drive.
And it's like the commercials that you see. If buzz driving is drunk driving.
Yeah.
It is. And it doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be, THC. It could be some other impairing substance.
Sure.
So in that same theme of getting, an Uber, you will wish you have gotten an Uber, once we talk about now, I'll move into, if you're convicted of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In North Carolina, there are 5 basic levels of punishment, level 1 through level 5. There's also an aggravated level 2. And, I normally explain that to clients, during the interview if I shouldn't say qualify for that, if they hit that level.
Yeah.
Level 1 and level 2 are pretty much, those are the ones that really punish you, because level 1 DUI and a level 2 DUI, that comes with active time.
It kind of works in the reverse order.
It works in the reverse
level
order.
1 is the highest.
Is the highest. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
And level 5 is the lowest level of punishment. If you are convicted, if you go through the process and somehow you either enter a plea of guilty or you're found guilty with a driving while impaired, a level 5 would be the lowest. And the punishment for that is basically unsupervised probation. If you had a valid license within a year of the time that you got stopped, you're eligible for driving privileges because your license will be revoked for a year. You'll have to do community service. Okay, you'll have fines and you'll have costs to court.
Yep.
But the biggest thing is you'll be on unsupervised probation, which is a good thing because you don't have to report to a probation officer.
Yeah.
Now, when you go from a level 5 to a level 4, okay, you're still unsupervised probation, but it could be more community service. It could be more fines, as well as a level 3, But when you get to the level 1 or the level 2, you're looking at active time. And with the
when you say active time, you mean jail.
Yeah,
you're going to jail.
You're going to jail. It could be 7 to 30 days.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking about the very basic, punishment. Things that will get you into a level 1 or a level 2 type deal as far as where you'd have to do actual time is, number 1, if you've had a DUI conviction within the last 7 years, okay, that will get you into a level 1 or 2. Number 2, if you had somebody under 18 in the vehicle or somebody that could not get out of the vehicle in case there was an accident, if they were disabled or something to that effect. Number 3, if your license are revoked because of a prior DUI. And they're still under suspension for that DUI. And number 4, if you have an accident that caused death or serious bodily injury, that could land you, of course, in a level 1 or a level 2. Now, having said that, the court itself goes through what they call mitigating factors and aggravating factors, okay? And I will tell you, if you're a 3, 4, or 5, if you do things like get a substance abuse assessment, that may bring you down to, a level 5.
That would be a mitigating factor.
That would be a mitigating factor.
Yeah. Okay.
An aggravating factor could be that you blew a .14, which is, pretty high. And that could be an aggravating factor. So at the end, what the court determines is, are there more mitigating factors than aggravating factors? Because if there are more mitigating factors, such as, a clean driving record, if you've not had certain amount of points within the last few years on your record, that could also get you to a level 4 or level 5. And I'm not saying that, go out and get a DUI and try to see what level you can get. All I'm saying,
this isn't a competition.
It's not a competition, I promise. But there are things that you can do on your own to mitigate it. Now, I do also want to talk about that .15. Okay. If you blow a .15, okay. Well, let me rewind just a little bit. If you're out on a date and your date comes and picks you up, or you meet them at a bar and you go out to the car and they have to pull out a machine to blow into it before they start the car, they've had a DUI.
Yeah.
It's just plain as simple as that.
I've heard about those things. Yes. I've never seen one.
Yeah. Well, and what it is, if you blow a .15 or more, the law says that you have to have what's called the interlock system in your vehicle.
Okay.
Which means that before you can start your car, you have to actually blow into this machine, and that machine has to register that you have no alcohol in your body, or
no alcohol.
No alcohol. You can't have it. None.
Not even a .01.
No. Can't have any.
Okay.
And a lot of individuals have situations that come up where mouthwash has alcohol in it, so it registers it, and the DMV of course picks it up. And there's certain things that'll happen, like you can ask for a hearing and things of that sort. But if you blow a .15, okay, or more, you're going to have the interlock system or the interlock machine in your vehicle, and you have to have that machine at least for a year. A lot of people say, well, you know what, I don't want that. I'm just going to wait my year that my license are suspended, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to go ahead and get my license. Then your license are not able to be restored unless you've shown that you've had that interlock machine in your car or the vehicle that you'd be driving for at least a year.
Even after a year, you wouldn't be able to get your license
Even
back?
after a year, you wouldn't be able to get your license back.
You got to run that interlock system.
You're gonna have to run the interlock system.
Yeah.
And, and it's pretty expensive. I mean, it really is. It will cost you a lot. Now, I say that a level 1 and a level 2, of course, gives you active time, but there's also ways you could mitigate that amount of time also.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the ways, of course, that you can mitigate it, which a lot of people do, is called a continuous alcohol monitoring system. That is a machine or a device that you place on your ankle, and it detects whether or not you have alcohol in your system.
Believe it or not, in Elk Camp last year, there was one of the guys there that had one of those things on his ankle.
Well,
all the other guys are sitting around the campfire knocking them back, and he's like,
he can't. He can't because it registers. And if there's any bright side to blowing a .15, if there is a bright side to it, with the .15, you're still eligible for, under certain conditions, for driving privileges. But with a .15, you're able to drive at any time, pretty much, because if you blow into the machine and it cranks, that means you're not under the influence of any alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're able to drive. Now, for individuals that don't do that they're not blowing a .15 and they are eligible for driving privileges, okay, because you're not eligible for driving privileges if you're a level 1 or level 2.
Okay.
But if you're level 3, 4, and 5, you're eligible for driving privileges. And the thing about the driving privileges, you're only allowed to drive 6 in the morning to 8 p.m. at night, Monday through Friday. That is the standard hours. Now, if you happen to work outside those hours, say you work on a Saturday or a Sunday, you are able to get driving privileges that will, encompass that time that you're working if you can get a letter from your employer stating that, number one, you are an employee and these are what your hours are. You can even get privileges for church if you have a letter as a church member and from the church on their letterhead saying that he attends or she attends service regularly and this is the time.
You just got to tell the preacher you got a DWI.
You just got to tell the preacher you got a DUI and repent at the same time. So at the end of the day, it's devastating for some individuals to get a driving while impaired. It really is, but it's not normally the end of the world. Now, I will tell you, your insurance will go up.
Yeah, sure.
And so you have to be prepared for that. In fact, I've actually seen where insurance companies have actually, before anybody gets convicted, while they're just charged, their insurance rates will go up. But that depends on your insurance company and the individuals. Yeah. But a driving while impaired, I indicate to my clients all the time, here in our district, driving while impaired, passing a stop school bus, those are citations or traffic violations that, our district, they will prosecute to the fullest, and so you have to be very, very careful. And again, it's back to what you said, buzz driving is drunk driving. Now, you can also, just like I also tell my clients, they may not have been drinking, but if the blood comes back and you have, illegal substances in your system, sure, you can get a driving while impaired conviction for that under certain circumstances. Yeah. So it's not just having a BAC level of a .08. If you have any other impairing substance, of course, in your system. And I think what a lot of individuals don't realize, again, as I pointed out earlier, is that it's a .08 or more, or appreciably, by observation, you're appreciably impaired. If I saw a guy drive up and park and they get out and they're stumbling around, okay, and can't put their words together. They're slurring their speech. A lot of times that's enough to say, hey, this person may be appreciably impaired.
If there's an officer sees that, he's probably going to investigate.
He's definitely going to investigate it. He's going to he's definitely going to investigate it. Now, I did give a scenario where they stop you. A lot of times, or sometimes, the officers don't stop you. They could see somebody walking out of a bar and, appreciably impaired, stumbling, and get under the wheel of the car. And
they don't ever get started.
And they get under the wheel of the car and they move it, of course, and it has to be in a public vehicle area. Yeah. But if they're sitting in the car, unless they start it and operate it, because they can get in there and go to sleep and sleep it off. But if they get in there and they operate it and move it, then the officer can, if it's on a public street or highway, then and you're subject to an impaired substance, more than likely you're going to have to deal with a possible conviction for driving while impaired.
Oftentimes in these situations, the officer shows up after an accident, right?
Yes.
And that's where it gets a little dicey with who was driving, and that can be a little tricky, can't it? Now,
I will tell you, in the past, I've had clients who have sometimes left the scene of the accident. There have been cases where individuals have passed someone on the side of the road. Officer comes to investigate it. They'll come to investigate the scene. They'll get the tag number and they'll go to where the address where the tag is registered, and the person will be there drinking. So here's the dilemma. Was he drinking before, or she drinking before and they had the accident, or did they have the accident and were they drinking afterwards? Because you have to show that they were operating a motor vehicle while they were subject to an impaired substance. And so you do have, I will tell you, I've had some clients in the past who've sort of what I would say split the hairs on a bald head, meaning they're really running really close, where officers will come to the house and that person will just steady be drinking. And at the time they'll say, well, you can't really tell whether they were inebriated at that time or before the accident. Wow. So there are, every situation normally is unique. It really is.
And that's why it's so important for folks to come in and make an appointment and just talk to you and say, hey, here's what happened. So often they get arrested. They don't have the opportunity to talk to an attorney.
They don't.
But they can have somebody present with them when they do, and the officers go through all that.
Yes, they do. They do. They should. And actually, you're actually, before you blow into the machine, they're to give you 30 minutes to have somebody to come and witness you blow. And a lot of times, clients are a little bit too appreciably impaired to remember that they were even asked. But I will say that even though we're here to help, definitely here to help. But as far as drinking while impaired or under the influence, I definitely advise my clients not to do so. I'd love to represent you, but at the end of the day, you got to be a little bit smarter than to go out and drink under the influence and operate a motor vehicle. I tell my clients, I'm not here to judge you, because everybody makes a mistake.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you, a driving while impaired charge doesn't matter who you are. I've seen some individuals who are professionals. I've seen, individuals who weren't part of the workforce. I've seen individuals who, were really in high-powered positions. So it could happen to anybody. I know that sounds cliche, but it definitely can. It can happen to anybody.
I got pulled over for DWI one night over here on the west side of Statesville. I'm riding along. Now, I was a young kid. And I'm driving along.
You should have called me.
No, I know, right? I don't even know if you were practicing at the time. So anyway, I'm driving along. I loved these old Jeeps. So I had an old 78 CJ7. I'm driving through on Front Street.
Yeah.
And I've got my girlfriend with me at the time, and we're driving along. Hadn't been drinking anything.
Yeah.
But the steering in that old Jeep was so bad, you just kind of bounced off of the sides of the lane. And this city cop gets behind me, pulls me over, and he said, "Man, you're swerving all over the place. Have you been drinking?" I said, "No." And I grabbed the steering wheel, and it does this, even when it's not running. So he's like, "Man, get out of here. Be careful." So I've been pulled over for DWI. I wasn't even drinking. So
well, I can tell you this. Getting pulled over is very frightening for everybody.
As a young kid, I was really scared.
Especially as a young kid. And again, they have to have, and just to recap, if you're driving and they stop you, they got to have a reason to stop you.
Yeah.
Law enforcement has to have a reason to stop you. And again, they can't just automatically arrest you for, you know, driving while impaired. They have to develop probable cause and, of course, go through all the steps.
And that's why there's the you know, walk the line and all those tests that they do on the side of the road.
The totality of the circumstances, which means that they're taking everything into account. Okay, in order to develop that probable cause. But if you're ever charged, I'll be glad to help you. You know, here at Benbow, Davidson, and Martin, we are always here to help. I've been doing it for 20 plus years, 25 years, just about. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has. But we'll be glad to help.
Yeah,
if you have any questions, please set up an appointment and come and see us. Yeah,
thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure, hey, one thing to take away from this, if you don't get anything else, if you're going to drink, just get a designated driver, call Uber, get a taxi, whatever you have to do, but just don't drive while you're drinking. Yeah, because you definitely don't want to. You definitely don't want to be doing gymnastics on the side of the road with the state trooper. No, and you don't want to have to call this guy. But like you said, everybody makes mistakes. If you do mess up, if you do make a mistake, give us a call. We're here to help. And hey, no judgment here. We understand everybody screws up every now and then. So, guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. We want to keep you up to date on what's going on here at the law firm. So watch our videos, listen to our podcast, and we really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Thank you very much for tuning in.
The information contained in this video and audio recording is general in nature and should not be relied upon in making legal decisions. Every situation is different, and you should consult with your attorney before making any legal decisions.